Bangladesh is confronting a new wave of anger unleashed by the ousted former leader. It began when former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina delivered a speech from exile in India, calling on her supporters to protest. Well, that infuriated student groups and other activists who proceeded to tear down and vandalize buildings linked to Hasina.
The protesters called it a bulldozer march. Some were armed with sticks and hammers. Others brought a crane and excavator to demolish the house of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who led the country's independence from Pakistan in 1971. He's the father of the now ousted leader Sheikh Hasina, and that has stoked hatred against him as well.
In the last 15 years, we have seen Hasina use her father's name to stay in power. Hasina used the 1971 war in Bangladesh and other sentiments to play with people. And this house is representative of that. She used her speech to say the people killed her father and reached Bangladeshis to vote for her. Using these emotions, she managed to stay in power. That's why we want to destroy this place.
The protesters also vandalized other buildings connected to the ousted former leader. The attacks were triggered by Hasina's fiery social media speech in which she called on her supporters to stand against the interim government. The protesters accuse Hasina of crushing dissent with brutal force during her 15-year rule.
This house is a symbol of fascism. They didn't consider us human beings in the last 18 years. They tortured people, disappeared them, and filed cases. They didn't allow anyone to talk. I criticized the former government, and they filed a case against me. So for 3 years, I had to stay in hiding.
Some media reports suggest that the security forces did not intervene to stop the protesters from storming buildings. Last summer, a student-led movement ousted Hasina and she fled to India. But while she was in power, her forces killed around 1,000 protesters, many of them students. Some now complain that she is trying to meddle in Bangladesh's politics from India.
Why doesn't Hasina leave us in peace? She and her supporters looted and emptied the entire country. Now Hasina lives in luxury as she wished. Why is she trying to incite Bangladeshi people again?
The interim government in Bangladesh, led by Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus, has tried to extradite Hasina, but India has not responded yet.
Well, I'm joined now by Michael Kugelman, the director of the South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center. Mr. Kugelman joins me from Washington, D.C. It's good to have you with us. The outrage that we saw in that report, it's remarkable. Why is there still so much anger towards Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh?
Yeah, the anger is remarkable, and especially keeping in mind that the mobs went on the attack before Sheikh Hasina had even made her speech. Once they heard that she was going to make it, they started. They didn't even wait for the speech, which shows how much anger there is. So, I mean, there's so much anger against her because of her actions and her refusal to atone for them. People are angry about the repression and the corruption that was there over her 15 years of rule, and people are still so angry about the brutality that her security forces meted out on peaceful protesters during her final days in power. But people are also angry because she or her party have not acknowledged or apologized for all of those actions and those brutalities. On the contrary, she's been very defiant. She's blamed others for these things. So, she has not been willing to be introspective and to essentially acknowledge that she and her party and her government had done great wrong to the country for many years. So, she may be a disgraced and discredited dictator, but she's very defiant. And this really infuriates the country, and particularly its young people.
We know that the Bangladeshis are accusing Sheikh Hasina of meddling. What kind of meddling are they talking about?
I think that for most people in Bangladesh, they feel that the country has moved on and that she and her party are essentially nothing now, and yet they see her from India giving speeches in which she's calling on her supporters to take to the streets. Sheikh Hasina has also indicated that she does not believe that she actually formally resigned when she left the country 6 months ago this week, and so I think that for so many in Bangladesh, there's this fear and this concern that she's trying to stir things up and try to perhaps make a comeback, not through herself, but through her supporters, trying to get them and her party to come out in the street. And indeed, her party has said that they plan to stage street protests in the coming days. So I think that, for so many in Bangladesh, the view is that she's history. She's irrelevant. Why is she trying to stir things up back in Bangladesh?
And how far is the interim government with the reforms that it promised to the people? I mean, how much has changed since Hasina left?
Well, yeah, I mean, the interim government, one of its top priorities has been reforms. It's pledged to essentially rebuild the country because it argues that Sheikh Hasina and her government really hollowed out the country because institutions had become so politicized and so corrupt. And so there's a need to engage in large-scale reform. So there have been a number of reform commissions that have been formed in areas ranging from banks to the Constitution. But I will say that for many in Bangladesh, there's concern that even though there's been a lot of talk about the need to reform and you have these committees that are getting together and meeting, there's not a lot of clarity as to how far along these reforms have come. Not very clear what the ultimate goals are with these reforms, if there's any clear time frames at play. And I think at the end of the day, the more this government is in power, and it is 6 months this week, I think there's concern among many in the public that this is a government at the end of the day that does not have a formal mandate from the people. It's not an elected government. It's a government that took over after Hasina was ousted. And for sure, much of the country welcomed the interim government and continues to support it. But, the more you have these reforms take place without any clear indication as to where they're going, I think that there's a tendency to make a lot of people a bit impatient and concerned and wanting to have a better sense as to where things are going. But things have changed in a really big way. The country is much happier. It's much freer compared to how things were when Hasina was in power, particularly during her last few years. And I was actually in Bangladesh last week. I experienced this firsthand, just a lot more happiness and optimism, particularly from the young people. But with that said, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of complexity. As I said before, this is a government that's pledged to do a lot, but it doesn't have a formal mandate from the people. And it also does not have much experience governing. Even the head of the interim government, the Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, he's an economist, he's an academic. You don't have people in this government with experience with governing, and I think that's been a constraint too.
Michael Kugelman, director of the South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center. Mr. Kugelman, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.